Okay, so we now want to add some capabilities. I don't want this flashing the whole time. Thank you. We want to add some capabilities to our product. This is the form in our non-scaffolded controller where we can add a product name, a product description, a price, and a category. What I'd like to be able to add as well is an image, specifically the file name of an image, so that I could, below price here, have a section that said file name or image file name, and then a text area where I could type in an image file name. So I want that in my form, and which that means is I'll actually need to modify my products table. So my products table, I'm going to need to add a, say like an image file name column to it. And this is going to be done by way of a migration. And we saw last time that when we're just simply adding a column to a database table using a migration, we can sort of name the migration or name the migration command specifically so that Rails will write the whole migration for us. And so the migration is going to look something along the lines of Rails generate migration. And then there's this kind of format that we always follow when we're just adding a column, add X to Y, where X is a particular data type. And so in our example, it'll be Rails generate migration, add image file name to products, so X being the column name and Y being the database name or database table name, and then asserting that the image file name itself is a string. So that'll be what we run from the command line. That will generate a migration for us, and then we'll run rake db migrate to have that migration actually happen. So that's the first thing we need to do. So that was like modifications to the products table. We're also going to need to modify the form partial for products, because that's this form here. And so we'll need to add a new text field to the form for image file name. We're also going to need to modify the product model, and this will be to whitelist our new image file name property, so that the model knows that it's okay that the image file name is sort of modifiable from the web world or from the web form. The last thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to our sort of the front end of our store where we are displaying all of the products in our store, and we'd like the image associated with each product to be displayed. And so we're going to have to modify some code here as well, remembering that each of these products is displayed by way of a product partial. So we'll only need to change that product partial once so that it can now reference. So we'll modify the product partial to include the display of an image if there is one. And so if an image has been set, if we've actually gone and set the image file name property, we'll have to modify that. And the very last thing is we'll have to actually put some images into our site. And we're going to do that by just manually putting images into the app assets images folder. So we're going to manually add our images. It's going to be to the app assets images folder. And now this is where this particular solution sort of breaks down in terms of being sort of the best way of doing this. It's not necessarily all that friendly to have to manually first add all of the file names to each associated product and then add all of those images to that images folder. Especially if you have images that are all of different sizes, you would then have to manually resize on your own using some kind of image editor all the images to make sure that they're the same size. So this is one way, probably the easiest way to add an image, but another way of doing it would be to use a attachment gem. So there's two gems that are popular in the Rails world for doing file attachments. One's called Paperclip, the other one's called Carrier Wave. I only have experience myself with Paperclip, but it gives you extra capabilities. It makes it so that when you edit a particular product, there would be a browse button, and you would then be able to find an image on your hard drive, upload that when you submit the form, and Paperclip then would resize the image into any size that you had specified in the model that you wanted. So it could create for you a thumbnail, a medium-sized image, a large-sized image, and then throughout your website, maybe on the front page you only use thumbnails, on the individual product page you use your medium size, and it does all that work for you. It does all the image processing for you. So it's probably a better solution, but for your project you can use either way. You can use this way or a gem like Paperclip. So before I start, do we have any questions about what I'm about to implement? All right, so let's start by adding the new column to our products table. So that means I need to open up another command prompt here, and I'll just make sure that everything is added to Git before I begin. Category addition to the product form with a drop down. Okay. So once I push this, I'll run my migration command, which is Rails generate migration. The migration name is add image underscore file name to products, the table I wish to add it to, and the image file name itself is a string. That's the data type. Or in the back end, that will end up becoming in the database a varchar. That looks good. I can run it. In my DB migrate folder, a new migration will soon pop into existence. Normally I just trust Rails that it built it correctly, but we can take a peek at it just to see what's inside of this migration. And you can see that it's a instruction to Rails, or to Rake, which is what we'll be calling in a moment, to add a column to products called image file name, which is a string. So it just pulled out that information from the command line because we sort of named that thing correctly, add X to Y. And so when we run our rake db migrate, we're going to have that modification carried out for us. Rake db :migrate. That'll do it. Takes a few moments. We'll see a nice little success message saying that it's added the column. Good. So now that I've added that, I want to go to my model, which is the model that I've just been working with. So I modified the products table, and so I need to modify the product model. And what I need to do is, this is the whitelist. This adder accessible explains to Rails what should be accessible by way of a web form. What can the user change by way of a web form? And we want them now to be able to change this image file name. So I have to add that to this comma delimited list. If I did not do this, and I simply went and started modifying the form, when I tried to submit a new product or an existing product that had an image file name, I would get what's called a mass assignment error. So I need to whitelist this new field here. On its own, this did nothing to our form. So /product/new is in no way changed yet. It still has a name, a description, a price, and a category. We want to add file name now. We want to add that between price and category. So I'm going to go open up that form, app, views, products, form partial, and I'll just copy and paste the price, these 4 lines here, paste them in here, well, almost all of them, and I'll modify both the label and the text field such that I don't just want to label for a price, I want to label for my image file name, and I want a text field for my image file name. By modifying this one form, because it's a partial it was built originally by scaffolding, it's being used by both the new view and the edit view. So both editing existing products and creating new products will now have the ability to have a file name specified. Reload my form. There it is, image file name. If I go to an existing product and edit it, there's some Ruby shoes. And so I might say Ruby slippers.jpg and submit that. And if I was to try to edit that same product again, we should see that file name persisted. And it has. So we've done a few of these steps. We've added our new column to our table. We've modified the form partial. We've updated the whitelist in our product model. We now need to modify the partial so that products get displayed with the image. And then we need to put some images into my app assets images folder. By default, there is one image in there. All Rails products or all Rails projects have by default a Rails.ping in there. That may go away in Rails 4, I'm not sure, but at least in Rails 3 that Rails.ping is there. And so just to begin with, that's what I'm going to use for this particular Ruby shoes example here. I'll just do Rails.ping and I'll update that. So what I would like on the front end is for any product that happens to have an image file name set, I want that image to be displayed. And right now it'll just be this one image or this one product. At this point, we need to remember a few things about our application. One is that the front end is controlled by way of a store controller. Right? The store controller has 2 actions, an index and a show. This is the index. The root is the index, shows all of my products. And clicking on their names takes us to the individual show, both of which use our partial. So if we make a change to our partial, both the index and the show views will be appropriately updated. And the partial itself is in the app views products folder, and it's called _product.html.erb. And so when we added a category, we had to add it within an if statement here, just in case there were some products that had yet to have been assigned categories. So we said if product.category, meaning, was there something there? If this product category was nil, well, nil evaluates as false, so then we would never get into the body of this if statement, which is important because if we did get in here and category was nil and we tried to call .name on nil, well, there's no .name method on the nil class, so it would just fail. So we had to guard it. We had to guard that statement. we'll have to do the same thing for our image. Not all of our products have images, so we can't simply ask all the images to be displayed because we'll also be displaying some markup associated with them. So we don't want to generate sort of image tags that have empty SCRs in them or whatnot. So let's say I want my image to display like after the price but before the description. So here inside of a paragraph tag, I would like something like an image SCR with, you know, my actual source, an alt tag with some data. I want something like that to show up with the image file name appearing here. Well, I don't manually write that out myself. What I'm going to do is, oops, hit F1 for help. What I'm going to do is first do a little bit of a guard here. I'm going to say if product dot image file name, ensuring that I actually have an image file name. And initially inside of this paragraph, I'm simply going to try echoing out that image file name. So baby steps. So for the Ruby shoes product, I should see the words alone, just the words, rails.png after the price. And for all of the products, I shouldn't see anything between the price and description. So we test, and then we display. And there it is, rails.ping. The rest of them don't have anything because they don't have the image file name set. The path is currently in my app assets images folder. That's the path to the Rails ping. But we don't manually enter that because, as we've seen with Rails routes, our URLs do not directly match our file system folders. And so we don't try to manually route to or manually path to this file name with our own image tag. We use the image tag helper to build the image SCR for us. So we just say image underscore tag product image file name. And Rails will build the appropriate image tag for us, and it will path appropriately to the right location. Yay, an image displays. Isn't that amazing? And so we can now go and add images for our other products. And to do so, we'll need to add a bunch of images to this assets folder, this image assets folder. So I happen to have another project where I can go and do that. I'm going to go find some other images. I'll go get them in my app assets folder from the other section. So I'll copy these in to this folder, and I can now go and edit my products so that I give each of these products an image associated with it. So I'll re-edit the Ruby shoes, and I'll change that to the Ruby slippers.jpg that I now have in this folder. Close the other folder. Ruby slippers. I'll edit the second product, old bananas. So I have like a bananas.jpg here. Giant picture of bananas. I'll edit the laptop computer. Here we are. Wow. That's a fast computer with glasses. And finally, I will add a hamburger image, which, depending on if you're a vegetarian or not, will either make your mouth water or you will be repulsed. Giant hamburger, delicious. So there's already a problem here. Who's seen the problem in action?
I can't see anything but the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, whoa, this is our front page now, and it's ridiculous. It's absolutely awful. We've got these giant images, and so yes, I could like open up Paint, or I could like open up GIMP photo editor or something, and I could start manually editing these images, which is sort of why I would recommend sort of not doing it this way. You might want to do paperclip, the paperclip route, because you declaratively mention in your model when you install paperclip the sizes of the images that you want, and it will create like a set of images for each image that you upload. There's a bit of a hack we can do, but it's awful, but I'll show it to you anyways. And the bit of the hack is I can go in and as an extra attribute or an extra sort of parameter here, I can specify like a set width. So I can say like the width of each of these images should be capped to 150 pixels, and that the height should scale appropriately based on that. Okay, right? So that's like our images are of more manageable sizes, but you're still like, it's still awful, right? Because you have these giant images in the back end. So sure, if someone's on like, you know, a really fast internet connection, they're probably not going to notice that you're forcing them to download these giant images just so you can display 150 pixel versions of them. But if someone's on a mobile phone on like a bad 3G connection, they're going to be cursing you because you're making them download these giant images and only displaying miniaturized versions of them. So just using the browser to scale your images is never a good idea unless you're lazy like me and I want to finish the screencast. So for me, what I would have to do if I wanted to stick with this sort of way of dealing with images, I would now open up each of these images and I would actually modify them. I would actually scale them and resave the images. Like the Ruby Slippers image is like 0.5 meg or more, right? So I really have to do some work here. I need to scale them down. But if this was a production site, I wouldn't even be doing it this way. I would be using the paperclip gem or carrier wave. So that's really the guts of what I wanted to show you today. The partials now display across the board. So if I drill down to like the show view of any of these particular products, they're also enhanced to display the image because the same HTML is being used. My backend, not so much, right? My backend is simply still displaying the name, description, and price. I might want to go and edit this to either display a thumbnail of the image or maybe just the image file name itself. The show view, I believe we modified the show to properly use the partial. So the show on the back end is actually doing the right thing. For your project, you can use either way. If you use the just what we've done today and you manually scale all your images, that's totally acceptable. If you want to go the extra step and learn about either paperclip or carrier wave, you can do so as well. Sometimes it can be difficult to figure out which gems to use. So like I know that paperclip is a useful gem because I've used it, but the names of Ruby gems tend to be somewhat ridiculous. And so just searching for like, you know, Ruby gem file uploads or something like that might not get you to paperclip. It might. But then it also becomes sometimes you have a number of gems that all do the same thing and you don't know which one is the best one. So a good way to evaluate that is the Ruby Toolbox. And what the Ruby Toolbox does is it collects and categorizes all the different gems that exist for Ruby. And if I search for image here, you can see here's one for image processing. That's not quite what I want. But here's one labeled Rails file uploads. That seems to be a good potential candidate. And it lists all the different gems that deal with file uploads in Rails, and it ranks them. And you can see paperclip ranks at top, carrier wave ranks second. And they're ranked in an interesting way. They're ranked according to things like the number of downloads from the Rails gem site, the number of watchers on the GitHub account. If it's I think you have to basically be an open source gem to participate here because it's attached to a GitHub account. The number of forks. Super important is the last commit. So how long ago was this gem still in active development? If the gem has not been touched in 2 years, it's either perfect or abandoned. And no code is perfect, right? So it's probably abandoned. And you don't want to be using an abandoned gem in your project because you're not going to be able to get support for it. Now, if you find that it's like your only option and you really want to use it, well, sure, it's open source. You can, if you need to make fixes to that gem, you can fork it and you can become the new maintainer of that gem. If the existing maintainer has stopped maintaining it, that can become you. But for the most part, you want to pick a gem that's being actively maintained and that a lot of people are still using in their products as well. And so that's how I pick my gems. I go to the Ruby Toolbox and I sort of narrow down. So as I said, I only have paperclip experience myself. I have heard good things about Carrier Wave, and it's starting to gain ground on paperclip as well. But that's that. You can pick one or the other for your project, or just stick with what we've done today and manually scale your images before you put them in your app assets folder. And so on that note, any final questions before I turn off the screencast? Is it hard to make the link to the picture? What do you mean by that? Oh, so like make the picture clickable? Great. Okay, let's do that. So right now, we have this image tag which is being used. We can use a link to. So remember when we wanted to link to our product with the product name being the text, that was what was sort of the first argument to link to. So I'm going to add some parentheses here, and the reason is I want this entire thing, this entire image tag, to be the first argument of my link to. And so now I can say link to image tag being what I want in my link text, and then what I want to link to is the product. And so I should now be able to reload my page, and we'll probably see so there's some default CSS happening here by way of probably the scaffolding CSS style sheet, so you don't see the standard sort of blue line around any linked images here, but you can see that when I go over top of it, at least it has this under sort of black line below it, and clicking on it should take me to the individual product. So again, to quickly recap, what I did there was I ended up using link to, and then the first argument of link to was what was returned by the image tag helper. And then the second argument to link to is what I actually want to link to itself, and that's the product. So yeah, thanks for that question. That's awesome. Anything else to do with images or anything I've mentioned today? Okay, at that point I will stop this from running.